So we're back again, this time episode 16. With you as always is me, Chucky from the forums, and we've got Jigsaw.
Hope you are doing well.
Yep. Now we've got another 5 movies to discuss, but actually just before I wanted to, before I introduce those movies, I just wanted to highlight something and ask you a question, or actually ask a question on behalf of someone else from one of our YouTube videos. Now, a couple weeks back, we watched and reviewed the Poughkeepsie tapes. Now, someone posted a comment on YouTube in response to this, and I'm sure it's directed at you because you opened up the movie that they said, how do you fuck up the pronunciation when they literally say it multiple times throughout the videos and previews? Just saying.
Well, in my defense, I thought it was Poughkeepsie, and I actually still think it's Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not sure how it's officially pronounced. I looked it up before doing the show, and then in the in doing the show, you can sometimes forget things like that. So
Yeah.
and yeah, sounds better. So not me.
Yeah.
That said, it's not my intention to mispronounce anything. So if I mispronounce a name or a city, no offense is meant. So.
But it can be called the Poughkeepsie tapes, for like I said in that review.
It's funny because both of us gave it like an okay rating too.
Well, I gave it a 5 from my memory, which is actually pretty below average for me. But moving on, so we've got 5 movies to discuss for today. So we've got Dead Snow from 2009, which has some Nazi zombie action. Then we'll be discussing Strip to Kill from 1987, which has some titties. Then we move on to Stephen King adaptation Needful Things from 1993. Then a non-horror entry for this week, Kickboxer from 1989 with Van Damme. And then to finish things off, we'll be talking about My Bloody Valentine from 1981.
So, to start us off, we have the Norwegian movie Dead Snow from 2009. It's a mini zombie movie, so it's a pretty simple plot. A bunch of medical students go to a somewhat secluded cabin in a very snowy area, which is probably most of Norway. And they run amok of Nazi zombies. And they have to try to survive through the onslaught of zombies, and it's basically the movie. I mean, unless you want to throw some more plot points in, but that pretty much covers it in my opinion. And it's a pretty enjoyable movie. It's a horror comedy, but the comedy's not generally as over the top as, say Shaun of the Dead or, other zombie comedies you may know. And that part of that may be because the fact that it's Norwegian, but I don't know, it's a pretty enjoyable movie. A lot of great gore in the movie, a lot of good action, some good fight sequences. I have a few notes about this one, but before I get too much into it, Chucky, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I've seen this one a couple of times now, and it's enjoyable enough. It's I don't think it's great, but it has its moments. There's 1 or 2 decent gory kills, and it's got a little bit of humor thrown in. Some of it falls flat, some of it gets a giggle or 2, but yeah, I think overall it's okay. One thing I kept noticing, I don't think I ever really paid attention to this until this most recent viewing of it, but I don't know what it is with these zombies, but a lot of them do this weird horizontal run past the screen, and there's someone on camera, right in front of the camera, and instead of a zombie charging and just jumping on them, they just run across them. As we could see most notably at the start when one guy gets his throat slit, and I don't know, it just seems really weird behavior for a zombie to just, well, I guess they're not the most typical zombies out there.
Yeah, because it does seem like these zombies can actually take orders, so
Yeah.
they're not as mindless as some, though they are not to, so.
Yeah, I just found it odd that there's a couple different scenes where they just run straight across the screen rather than right at the person that they should just be attacking. I don't know. But, yeah, I guess the one thing that holds it back for me is the fact that it's a foreign movie. You know, I'm pretty peculiar when it comes to foreign films. Some of them,
I'm amazed you can get through American movies on the side.
I didn't really have too much of a problem with the subtitles or anything, but there's just something weird about a lot of different foreign countries and how the people act, and some of it just seems so alien to me.
Have you never had fornication in an outhouse? Is that not something you guys do?
Well, I'm sure some people do. I don't know, but I don't necessarily want to be getting laid while I've been taking a shit. That's all I can think about. Did that dude drop a load? He must have. If not, he did directly after, because that's why he went out there. That's just disgusting.
It's not the most romantic of locations. But sometimes love is strange. So.
That dude literally left the room talking about this big meaty dump that he had to take. I mean, it wasn't exactly like a good prelude to having sex.
Maybe that's what turns that woman out.
Yeah, she's a scat woman. Yeah, but I mean, this movie had a few decent moments. So I just don't necessarily love it.
Out of interest, are you a big zombie movie guy, or is that not really your thing?
No, not much of a zombie guy. I mean, there's probably some movies out there I give maybe an 8 out of 10 to, and probably and I'm just kind of guessing off the top of my head, but probably Shaun of the Dead is right up there at the top. So, and that's because, you know, it is comedy as well, and so even if I'm not really enjoying the zombie action specifically, I can always fall back on all the comedy. So in this one, you know, the guys try to be funny, and like I said, sometimes it falls flat, sometimes it gets a giggle or two, but yeah, there's just something about not all foreign countries that just kind of weird me out, but these guys talking about anal sex at the start, it just makes me sound like some real dirty motherfuckers.
if we have any Norwegians listening, those are Chucky's opinions and not mine.
I mean, you've heard me talk about French movies and how weird I think French people are. I think they're just... I mean, they take the form of humans, but I'm not even convinced French people are real people.
I have nothing to say directly to that. I think you mentioned that there were a few gory moments. I actually think one of the best things this movie does is the pretty large amount of blood they have on screen. There's a guy who gets his face ripped in half, which I thought it didn't look amazing, but it was pretty decent.
That was probably the best one.
Yeah, I also like that there's a guy who gets his arms and legs ripped off in a somewhat comedic, but it's still, you know, decently effective scene. And I don't know, I enjoyed like the two people toward the end trying to fight through the horde of zombies. You know, it's extraordinarily unrealistic in many ways. You know, but at the same time, I thought it was, you know, decently fun because those two people you wouldn't necessarily expect to be zombie kick-ass people. So, you know. At the same time, I don't think this goes above and beyond what a zombie movie should do. I think it's okay. I think the zombies are decent. I like the fight scenes, and the gore's great, but I don't think it doesn't do much more than that. And I'm not like the biggest zombie guy, but you know, there are about the zombie movies in this one out there, and this I don't know, it's okay. It's a decent movie, but I don't think it, like you said, it's not really amazing.
Yeah. That one guy, and I know they address this fairly early in the movie, the one guy who's like afraid of blood, and they're all medical students. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible. Like, I know they address it, but how are you a medical student and afraid of blood? I mean, that's just so stupid.
I guess theoretically you don't have to deal with corpses or anything until like probably your third year. So I mean, maybe it doesn't come up for the first year or so. I have
But
no
I mean,
idea.
you got to know that at some point you're going to be dealing with blood. I mean,
One thing I always thought was a bit strange about that guy. This is somewhat toward the beginning when he's showing his girlfriend the I forgot what it was. It was some like old Madigal type thing. It's like
I was about to bring it up too.
He's
Yeah.
like suffocating, you know. I don't know. Like the guy just keeps going, and I don't know that guy. I would think something like that would come up again, but
Nothing turns on your girlfriend more than attempted murder.
I mean that guy's probably my favorite character. For the most part, so like the hippie-looking guy, but that guy's probably my favorite character, regardless. But that scene is always just a bit strange.
The scenes where the idea of what they're doing is funny, but I think because it's in another language, it doesn't quite translate 100% through to me. Like the scene where they're just trying to make noise and draw out the zombies, you know, using the two guys as bait, and he tells the one guy, hey, do something, so he yells out and basically calls all the zombies pussies and stuff, and then immediately after he's like, oh shit, I think I went too far, you know. Like, I can imagine that being funny, but just being said in another language and just reading it on the screen just didn't really have the same effect for me.
That's interesting, because I actually have this movie on DVD, and I have both a subtitled and dubbed option. Of course, I always go with the subtitled, so I'm going to assume that however you watched this, you did not have the option to watch it dubbed.
No, I've got the UK Blu-ray, which seems to only just have subtitles, so.
So pretty much DVD is better than Blu-ray.
Well, maybe for that movie, I don't know.
So I think this movie is decent. I think I've seen it like 3 times. I have a consistently okay time with it. It hits a decent amount of the right marks, but it doesn't go above what I would hope a zombie movie would. I guess there's one emotional scene in the movie that's pretty decent. And this, you know, like I said, the movie really succeeds when it deals with the gore, but it's a movie I find okay, but not much more. So I'd give this an average rating of a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm pretty much thinking somewhere around the same. Yeah, I thought I had an okay time watching it. It's certainly nowhere near my top or near the top of my favorite zombie movies. And like I was saying earlier, zombie movies not exactly a favorite subgenre of mine. I give it a 6 out of 10. I was thinking maybe a 7, but I think I'll stick with a 6 for now. Yeah, it's got a couple of laughs and it's entertaining enough, but outside of maybe 1 or 2 small scenes, there's nothing that I really care to go back and see anytime soon. The idea of the movie, you know, having Nazi zombies, the idea is better than how it's actually executed. Not that they did a bad job, it's just I thought they could have still gotten more out of it. I mean, that main zombie guy, I can't remember the name of him, but he had a very interesting screen presence, I guess. And he doesn't appear all that much in the movie. So,
out of interest, have you seen the second Deaths now?
Yeah, I've got it on Blu-ray as well. Watched it once, I think. I don't think I've watched it since then. I remember it being okay as well. You know, more or less about the same as this one.
Yeah, I've not seen it, but I only bring that up because generally it seems like people like the second one more than the first one.
Just off the top of my head, I think it was a little crazier, a little more off the wall than this one was. But yeah, I only watched it once, so I'll have to watch it again. Okay, well, moving on to another zombie movie. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so next up we've got Strip to Kill. Pretty simple plot here. 2 cops investigating the murder of a stripper, and I guess they figure the best way to catch a killer is to go undercover at the club. The female detective, starts stripping, and she seems to eventually really get into it. And almost loses sight that they are actually chasing a killer in the movie. But that's, more or less the plot there. Now, I actually never even really heard of this movie until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I just blind bought it on Blu-ray. I tend to enjoy, even though I think there's a shitload of generic movies out there in the erotic thriller type category, even the generic ones, I tend to just enjoy watching as a once-off, and so I find it quite easy to watch these type of movies. They've got a lot of TNA and stuff going on, so even if the thrilling horror type side of it is not doing any good, at least I get to see something worth looking at. But no, there's I thought it was a pretty interesting movie. There's a bit of a twist at the end that, even though I wouldn't say the twist is all that surprising, I didn't necessarily guess who the killer was in the movie, so I guess there's that.
Yeah, so this one, I've seen this one twice now. I watched it for the first time a few years ago. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It has a sort of charm to it that you might not necessarily anticipate just by reading the plot. Admittedly, some of the like, in my opinion, and you may disagree, some of the stripping sequences just get a bit repetitive. I mean, there's like so many scenes with just this like generic 80s music and this woman stripping, and I don't know if we needed like 15 minutes of that. But
that to pad the runtime.
Yeah, yes. But I actually think the mystery in this movie is decently interesting. I like the red herrings. I like, the characters who are maybe a little more complex than you might think at first. So, I don't know. And I really like the main actress, who's a woman I don't particularly know, named Kay Lands. And she was also in, I believe, House from 1985. So, I liked her. She was a pretty fun actress. And I don't know, I think because of the characters and the somewhat intriguing mystery, this movie had more going for it than just the obviously the appeal of seeing women strip. To be fair, there were some attractive women here, but that's not necessarily the main point of the movie when I watch it.
I thought she looks pretty good once she gets all dolled up for the stage.
I mean, she has some pretty creative things too. I like that one of the last ones when it's like a woman coming home from work. I could watch that.
Yeah. I think the one thing about this, there's certainly a lot of parts of the stripping scenes to enjoy, but one thing about the 80s that I think the 80s can keep is the hairdos. Some of the hairdos. I think some of the hair is tragic on some of the women. Like they do this weird curly Jerry curl type hairdo that, I don't know, the 80s can keep that style of hair. And I guess it's kind of funny when you actually compare something like this to how it would be done today, because today it's more like everyone's got to have this gigantic ass, and back in the 80s it was more just, tits.
Yeah.
So the majority of the women don't really, have these big asses that all these women have these days.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the expertise to compare 80s strip clubs to modern day strip clubs. So.
Yeah, it's just something I've picked up on. Anyways, I enjoyed the some of the banter back and forth between the two detectives. They had a bit of a complex relationship with one another, and just an example of that is, like, especially the I think his name is Heinemann, the male detective. He just some of his lines. He's a bit of a wise ass, I guess, and there's this one part where they're talking to each other, and he mentions something about her dancing naked, and she says, "I don't dance naked," and then she quickly finds out that he got her to go undercover and she wasn't cleared to do it, and And she's like, you got me to dance naked. And he said, but you don't dance naked.
Yeah, I actually thought those two worked together. This is a somewhat fun fact about the guy whose name is Greg Evigan. He was in a movie a few years later called Deep Tower 6, which is a somewhat popular movie. And I saw that movie about 3 or so months ago, so it's sort of interesting because he pretty much looks the same, you know. He's a lot more fun in this movie, in my opinion. I know there was a sequel to this, by the way, but I don't believe it uses the same characters, unfortunately.
No, from my memory, it's just completely new characters, and it's not as good as the first one, from what I can remember. But the second one does have really, I like the poster art or the DVD art. I'm not sure what it was. Very sexy. But I guess another thing to point out is I think this was the first movie directed by Kat Shea. I think she also directed Carrie too.
She did, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, just I mean, you could tell it's a pretty, I don't want to say amateurish, but it's certainly not the most professional looking production ever. But I thought, you know, the way she filmed this movie was pretty interesting and worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and though there weren't that many kills to speak about, you know, for a slasher movie, this is very, very light. But there were some, you know, enjoyable ones. I sort of like the woman at the beginning being doused in gasoline and lit on fire. That's a certain brutality to it. And of course the woman who's garroted and then dragged under a truck for God knows how long.
Yeah.
I wish the movie had a bit more of those than they did. You know, maybe instead of like the 15th stripping scene, they could have had another kill. You know, I would have been okay with that.
Yeah, it's pretty light on kills. So, but I think there's a lot of interesting characters and conversations throughout the movie that help keep your interest throughout. Yeah, so I mean, I enjoy a lot of erotically charged thrillers and horrors, and you know, there's a lot of stripping scenes in here to, you know, keep us going between all the different murders and thrilling things that happen during this movie. I give it a 8 out of 10. I really enjoy it, and I like to give this one a watch every few years. I think I've watched it maybe 3 or 4 times now, and every couple of years, yeah, I'll throw it on and have a good time with it.
I'm sure you do.
I don't. I watched it last night without any pants, by the way.
I know when I watched this, I did have pants on, so not to disappoint any listeners. They did not stay on for long, but this movie, I like it a lot more than I feel like I should, because, like I said, it's so light on actual kills, but it still has a lot of charm to it. I think what really makes it work is the characters. I like both of the main detectives, even though the guy is he's a bit aggressive for my taste, but he's still okay. And you know, I like the woman detective quite a bit. I really think the mystery in this movie is what kept me most engaged, believe it or not. So, I don't know, I really enjoyed this one, and I think I enjoyed it more this time than when I first saw it. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, and I'm also going to round this up to an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Probably one of the highest rated movies we've done.
And just another thing that I wanted to mention. Now, I mean, this might be a spoiler, so it may be good that I've left this right to the end, because I'm not sure how I can kind of talk about this without really spoiling it. So if you don't want this movie spoiled, go stop watching the video now and just go watch it. But the killer in the movie, on IMDb, it says this person is a woman.
No.
So it's the only movie this person's been in, but I'm sure it's a guy, right?
Okay, it looked like a guy. Yeah, I don't know. It looked like a guy, but they could possibly be like a trans guy or something. So they maybe look more. I don't know.
I just want to say, like, even to this day, I'm still confused as to if that's a guy or a girl, or, but I'll say if that is a guy, and I don't know how to verify it because this person's only been in one movie, but if they are really a guy, then they make a pretty decent, convincing woman.
Yeah, I actually think the plot twist was really good. I never saw it coming and first saw it. I was actually like, wait, who the hell is that? So I don't know. I actually really enjoyed the ending to this one. Next up, we have a adaptation of a Stephen King book, A Needful Things from 1993. In the small town of Castle Rock, a mysterious shop opens, which seems to have pretty much anything that people want when they go in. Only caveat being they get it for a cheap price, but they also have to play a prank on somebody else in town, and this sort of escalates into like pure insanity and madness as the movie goes on. And we learn some things about each of these characters, at least the ones they have in the movie. Before I say anything about it, I sort of want your thoughts on this one, Chucky.
Okay, so I actually never seen this movie before. So this was the first time watch for me. And Stephen King adaptations, they're kind of hit and miss with me. Obviously, there's some that I really love, It, Carrie. But then there's also some that I don't love, and hate might be a strong word, but I think they suck. And I think Needful Things sucks.
Now, out of interest, what about it? Did it do it for you?
I mean, it took an hour for anything really exciting to happen, and this is like a 2-hour movie. The old guy in the movie, I mean, he was okay, like, it was sort of interesting, but at the same time, I didn't care too much about him. The premise of the movie sounded a lot more interesting before I watched it. Like, I read the plot, and I was thinking, okay, this actually sounds interesting, and let's see how it goes. And I don't think I just think they could have done it so much differently, and it turned out way differently than I was expecting. I actually usually enjoy Ed Harrison movies. Didn't really care for him in this. I can watch him in History of Violence or Glengarry Glen Ross or any of these types of movies, and get some enjoyment out of his performance. But in this movie, I didn't. Playing a town sheriff, I mean, he didn't really do anything for me. I didn't really find anything enjoyable about his character.
Here's a somewhat fun fact. So he plays Sheriff Alan Pangborn, and that sheriff is actually the same guy in the movie The Dark Half, which came out the same year, which is another adaptation of a Stephen King novel. Only in that movie he's played by Michael Roque, who is a decently well-known actor. So I was confused why they couldn't just bring back Roque for this. I actually forget which one came out first, since they both came out in '93. But the point being, I feel like they could have just used the same character just to give a little continuity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they did bring back Rooker, then that might have been fine, because I'd say out of the two actors, I prefer Rooker, but
So my biggest problem with this movie, and this may not come as a surprise to people who know my problems with Stephen King movies. Needful Things is probably one of my favorite Stephen King books. I've read it quite a few times, maybe not as many times as it, but I've read it quite a few times. In fact, the copy I have really needs to be rebought. I think it's a fantastic novel, and this adaptation is like a insult to the whole book. And I have my review, which is posted there. It has a lot of these points, but my two biggest complaints is what they do with the whole Catholic versus Baptist thing, which is a sort of a small subplot in the movie, and the character of Buster Keaton. And I'll just make both of these short. In the novel, the Baptist versus Catholic thing eventually leads to an all-out brawl between like members of the Catholic congregation and the Baptist congregation, they just meet in the middle of a street and have this all-out fight. It's like butcher knives. It's a bloody fight. And it's just brutal. That happens sort of near the end of the novel, and so many other things are going on. There's no police to stop it. And in this movie, this is like a 1 minute punch out between the Catholic priest and the Baptist guy, and I don't know, it sort of took away all the power from that really, religiously charged conflict, and it just almost felt like a parody of what the book did. And the thing about Keaton, and if you've seen this movie, he's I think a decently memorable character, played by J.T. Walsh. This movie almost makes him out to be like toward the end, he almost comes across as like a heroic type guy. Like, hey, you screwed me over, now I'm going to get my revenge and blow you up. Which, again, in the book, now I don't want to spoil the ending, of course, because I encourage you to read it if you've not already, but in the book, he has, in my opinion, a much more sort of reasonable ending with his character. I mean, just like in the movie, 5 minutes before that, he like killed his wife with a hammer, and now he's like becoming the hero of the movie. Like, all that Ed Harris did was give a rousing speech, and I'm sorry, but that's not enough. So I don't know. It just really bothered me. They sort of changed the ending of this a bit, and there's one thing I liked about the ending, but the whole fact that like Buster Keaton did the final big, blowout, and it doesn't really mean much. I don't know, it just almost seems pointless in my opinion.
Yeah. I personally don't have a whole lot to say about the movie. I just thought it was really unenjoyable. And
how do you feel about the kid's attempted suicide? I've got to go to hell now.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's something else that bothered me. This seems, based on what I'm reading, this actually came out in theaters, it looks like. But this seems like a TV movie, in my opinion. I don't know, the acting seems a bit off. The production doesn't seem particularly good. I mean, I know they have a few bigger names, but it doesn't seem to mean much because the movie sucks. And I feel like with the source material, they could have done so much more. Like, they could have done so much more with this if they had just, I don't know, maybe like an HBO series or something would do this justice. But as a 2 hour movie, and actually, it's worth noting, and you may have read this too, there actually was a 3 hour version of this movie that was aired on, I think it was TNT, and they added like a bunch of extra scenes with a few smaller characters. So, and that version has, I don't think, been released on DVD. There's some legal issues with it, but that version might be marginally better than this one.
I don't know if I want to spend another extra hour watching this movie.
But see, if I didn't really look for it, I just watched what I could easily get to. Mainly because I knew, now I've seen this one before and I knew I didn't like it, so I just tried to get it done with. But I don't know, if you want, like, I guess the full experience, if you can try to find the 3 hour version, that might be worth looking into.
I can't say I'm going to be looking for it.
The issue with this movie is, since I've read the book, I found so many, things in this movie, some of them somewhat small, some of them somewhat big. Like, they left whole characters out that I thought were really interesting or important. The ending of the novel feels so much more epic than this. I mean, in the novel, Brian, who's the sort of young boy who starts this whole chain, he has a younger brother in the novel, and there's sort of some interesting characterization going on there. And it just leaves out so much, and it's only a 2 hour movie, and it's like something like a 750-page book. And oh god, now that I think about it, what they do with Pangborn, the main sheriff, played by Ed Harris, one of the most important character traits in the book is the fact that his wife and child died like the previous, I forget if it's a year, and they just completely take that out in the movie, and he's just a sheriff from a big city, and it just, I didn't get it. That was a big point of Pangborn's character, and it just bothered me. I just don't care for this, and I know that this has an okay rating on like quite a few sites, but I don't see it. I give this one a 3 out of 10.
Yeah, I also give it a 3 out of 10. Woo! We're so in sync. No, I just, it had an interesting premise. I guess that's more due to Stephen King than anything to do with this actual movie. Because the movie itself, I thought was pretty boring. The further it went along, the less and less interested I was in it. And it took so long for something to really happen for a 2-hour movie. It didn't do anything for me. And so like I said, it's probably very tough to come across any Stephen King related thing and not say it sounds interesting. But clearly, translating a novel to a screen takes some special talent, and whatever was needed there is not applied here. So I guess, all I can say is watching this movie is not a needful thing.
That's horrible. But not as bad as this movie.
So moving on to Kickboxer from 1989. An American kickboxing champion travels to Thailand with his brother to show off how great he is. And then he finds out he ain't all that great, as he gets destroyed and paralyzed by the Thai champion. The brother refuses to leave the country and finds the ultimate teacher of Muay Thai to help train him for a revenge match with the Thai champ. So this is a movie that, it's one of those movies that it's just like a staple of my childhood. Every time I go to the video store, quite often I would rent this out, and going to the video store wasn't something I would do all that often because I lived in a very small town. But yeah, it's a movie I'd pick up a lot and really enjoy watching. I think, it's very similar in a lot of ways to Bloodsport, and I think this is the movie Van Damme did pretty much directly after Bloodsport. There's obviously a few bits and pieces that are changed in terms of story, but at its core, it's still a guy, training martial arts to eventually defeat this ultimate badass champion. So, I guess, it's pretty much the same as Bloodsport. It's got some of the same cheesy type songs, maybe even sung by some of the same people. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I think Stan Bush does songs in both movies. I mean, Van Damme's physique in this movie is off the fucking chain, I guess. He's so cut in this movie that he could eat a piece of coal and shit a diamond. What else can I say about it?
Yeah, so I'm happy that you brought up Bloodsport, because I was just going to pretty much compare this one to that one, and I think both movies are pretty good. I enjoyed this, about as much as I thought I was going to, which is a good thing in this case. I went in with somewhat high expectations. It's a bit more over the top than Bloodsport is. There's some sort of really ridiculous scenes here. And I'm sure you know some of the ones I'm talking about. But at the same time, it also has some darker themes at times, and I think it sort of evens out. I really liked a lot that one. I forget the guy's name, but the trainer guy who was training him.
Dennis Chan.
Yeah, that guy is a lot of fun. Take this and run faster. I know. And quite a bit about that guy. I enjoyed him. And a lot of this movie is the training, so I'm happy that it's worth enjoying. I like the relationship between the two brothers, and like I said, there's some darker themes toward the end that come up. And I know the final fight isn't quite as dramatic as I was hoping it would be, but it was still pretty good. So I thought it was a pretty enjoyable movie. And even though I think Bloodsport did some things better than this one, this still did a pretty decent job.
Dennis Chan in the movie is pretty funny, he's got his moments, and he is in the first 3 Kickboxer movies, so it's good to see him continue on throughout at least some of the series. And he's kind of like a more twisted type of Mr. Miyagi, I guess.
Yeah, the whole thing about, I told them that you said they suck at fighting, and your mother fucked a mule. It's
When he's dropping the coconuts, he's like, "I'm okay," and then he's like, "Drop another one."
yeah, and like I said, those portions felt a bit more, not necessarily comedic, but they felt a bit, I don't know, almost a lot more lighthearted than some of this movie really is. So, I mean, I enjoy these moments, but at the same time, I don't know if they necessarily fit in.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of fun between.
Yeah, I think part of it, I can't take, at least in this movie, um, Jean-Claude Van Damme, I can't take him seriously. Like the way the guy speaks, like I don't know, he sounds like drunk half the time. He does, like, I don't know. And I get in the movie he's I think grew up in Belgium, but I don't know, I I didn't entirely buy him as like a serious, like, hey, I will get revenge for you. I think the brother should have gone with somebody else, but
Speaking of Belgium, because that's where Van Damme's from, or where he grew up. The main villain in the movie, Tong Po, is played by Van Damme's childhood best friend, who also came from Belgium with Van Damme to break into the movie industry. And I mean, there's a whole huge story about it, which is pretty interesting because they seem to go through a couple years of really, living on the streets and that type of thing until they kind of broke into the movie. So, and I think the interesting thing about Tong Po the villain is that the actor that plays him actually looks nothing like him, or at least not. He's wearing a lot of makeup in this movie. He's not Asian. So I think he plays one of the scariest non-horror villains that I think you'll see in any movies. Like that scene towards the beginning where he's just kicking the pillar. I used to watch that scene as a kid, and I was like, Jesus Christ, are there really people out there like this?
that reminds me, that scene immediately after that when Jean-Claude Van Damme goes running back to his brother. Hey, dude, you've got to leave. Like, I just saw this guy. You cannot fight him. It sort of cracked me up. And of course, the arrogance of the brother. Oh, I can fight anyone.
Yeah.
Oh, apparently not.
Motherfucker wants a street fight? I'll show him. And then he gets his ass kicked. Yeah. Especially since, the character of Tong Po is not like this huge, muscly dude like you probably see in most other villains from this type of movie. He's actually quite different and unique, I think. Yeah, so I really enjoy him as a villain in the movie. Before the show, I did show you that deleted scene that was in all the VHS, or it was in the VHS release that I watched growing up. And so I'm not sure if that was just added into the VHS just for extra runtime or something, but I don't know. It got taken out on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's I think it's a pretty good scene. I wish they'd kept it in, the scene where he's in hospital and crying about how he can't use his legs anymore and how he wants revenge, and
So like Chucky said, he showed me that scene, and obviously he has more experience with it. I wasn't necessarily as moved. I think the acting was a bit iffy. So that's my only thing. I like the emotional, relationship between the brothers, but I can see why maybe that didn't make some final cuts.
I think most people, and you can see all the comments from people in there, the majority of them were like, why'd they take this out? They should have left that in.
One thing I really liked about the end is after that like brutal fight, he like knocks out the main enemy and then he just like punches the other guy, which I don't know, it just sort of cracked me up because you sort of knew it was coming, but just finally seeing the guy taken down, no, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I guess one final thing that I'm not going to discuss it in great detail here, but I'll just mention that as you're aware that I actually like Kickboxer 2 more than Kickboxer, the original movie. So, whenever we get a chance to actually discuss that one, I'll explain a little bit more about why that is. But just for anyone out there listening, for controversial opinions and things like that, just keep a lookout for that. So, like I've been saying, it's a staple of my childhood. It's a movie I'd regularly rent out on VHS and watch any time I could. I would just watch the shit out of certain movies just over and over, and this is one of them. And it's not even my favourite movie in the series, so go figure. But no, I give this a 9 out of 10. I think it's just as good as Bloodsport. Both of those movies, they have the same level of enjoyment for me, so I think that's a pretty good rating.
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, I think this one is... I really liked Bloodsport, and I really enjoyed this one. It's a bit more over the top, and there's a bit more ridiculous things in here as compared to Bloodsport, but at the same time they deal with sometimes darker themes. Like, what kind of a heartless bastard was stab a dog? But there's some other things too. So I'm also going to give this a 9 out of 10. Despite some of the over the top sequences, I still enjoyed it. It was a fun movie.
And Dennis Chan cranks up the humor in the next couple of movies as well. So.
That might be a sight to behold.
Yeah. He's a funny, interesting character, and as long as he's in the movies are usually at least entertaining.
The final movie tonight is a classic slasher, My Bloody Valentine from 1981. In a small town of Valentine's Bluff, there is a Valentine's Day party planned, but this incurs the wrath of a 20-year-old killer who may have escaped from a mental, insane asylum. And so while these teenagers are trying to set up this party, the police chief and mayor are getting houts in boxes instead of chocolate, which is unfortunate. And so we eventually have the party cancelled. But the kids decide, hey, half of us work in the mine. Let's just hold the party at the mine, and that'll be okay. And they do, and then things happen. This is a movie. I'm a big slasher guy, but this movie more so than any is a movie I really enjoy. I really like the design of the killer in this movie, the mining suit and the pickaxe. I think the kills in this movie are pretty top notch. Especially if you see the uncut version, which was for a long time the MPAA had, sort of cut out some of those scenes, but it was, I think, finally released back in 2009 when the remake came out. So, if you see the cut version, it's still a decent movie, but if you get the uncut, I think you have maybe a little better time. I don't know, I also really like the characters in this movie, and to be honest, it's not much about this movie I have problems with. But, I guess what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. You brought up a lot of points that I had down here.
I'm sorry.
So one of the first points you made is the design or the appearance of the killer in the movie, which I also think is one of the best out of all the slasher movies out there. One of the best. The mining suit and the pickaxe, it's, it just looks really cool for a slasher killer type character. And another point that you mentioned with the uncut version, and I guess to add to that is just, and you really have to see the uncut version just to see how significant those cuts were, because it's not like just an extra 1 second here, 2 seconds there. Literally, the majority of the deaths in this movie have an extra, at least maybe 10 seconds on average added back to those scenes for each kill. Actual like gory, violent scenes, not just like an extra few seconds of someone looking at someone. It's actually like, seeing pickaxe through their head, and yeah, it's just you can kind of see why it got cut, or at least some of it got cut. Maybe they cut way too much, but I think there's a glaring difference between the cut version and the uncut version. Like, it's just night and day difference in terms of pretty much every kill in the movie.
Yeah, and no, my favorite one is the pickaxe to the face. Um,
Yeah.
but another one I really like is when this one individual gets his heart sort of pushed down into boiling water, and you can see sort of the flash peeling off his face, and I don't know, it, I think that's pretty effective, and I don't know, this is a movie that when I first got this on DVD, I watched it like 3 times in that week, and it's a movie that never failed to entertain me. I mean, even like the characters, like TJ and Axel are decently interesting, but then you have like characters like Hollis, who's Hollis might be one of my favorite characters, side characters in slasher movie. I just love that guy, and I don't know. Even some of like the women, like Hollis's girlfriend, who's I think it was Patty. She was a pretty nice individual. I liked her dialogue. Some of it's a bit ridiculous, but I don't know. It's a movie that has a great atmosphere, just so many things going for it. So it's a shame that this movie existed for like 25, 30 years without the extra footage of the kills, because I suspect there's many people who have seen this who don't know exactly how good this is. So they should definitely go back and watch this with the extra material.
There's one thing I enjoy whenever I see this happen in a movie is when you get unintentional animal interaction. like earlier in this movie, there's a scene where they're turning their car around and a dog starts chasing their car, which is clearly, I'm pretty sure it's clearly not intentional. There just happened to be a dog in that area that decided to go after them. And I really find things like that really funny, and probably a better example of this. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Samurai Cop, but there's a scene where the main character is running around a block, and there's this dog in the yard who just runs right after him, and it's clearly unintentional, but it's just fucking hilarious.
And another thing I wanted to bring up, and this is sort of corny, but I think it adds to a bit of the charm. I like the poems that killer leaves behind. Like, it just sort of cracks me up because they're not Shakespeare, but they're fun. Like the whole, hey, it happened once, it happened twice. Cancel the dance, it will happen thrice. I mean, that's a lot of fun. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is somewhat toward the end, when after he cancels the official dance, and he finds another heart in the box, and it says, "Hey, you did it, cancel the dance." And it's like, what dance? Like the chef is just going mad. He has no idea what's going on, and little does he know there's a bunch of teenagers having a pretty fun time, it looks like. Oh, and speaking of which, I really like the location. The setting is fantastic. Like, even ignoring the mines, I think the mines look great too. But that one girl who's in the warehouse area with all the suits hanging up, that's I don't know, I think that looks pretty creepy. Just the suits dropping down, and she has no idea who's doing it. I don't know. It just, again, the atmosphere is just intense stuff.
And I also enjoyed that one, that scene where the sheriff, finds the old lady in the laundromat.
Yeah.
That just the extra footage from that uncut version really, really elevates that.
That's probably one of the more gruesome deaths. That's not something that I've seen that many other places. So I don't know. I thought it's pretty creative.
Yeah. No, I think that was the first one. As I was watching the movie, I was like, Jesus Christ. When I first, because I bought the uncut version like as soon as it got released, back, it was like 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. Because that's one of the earlier kills in the movie. And yeah, that just really set things up for all the other uncut goriness and violent kills that we get throughout the movie.
And who is it, like the bartender? It could be you. That guy's over the top acting just cracks me up.
Yeah, there's often one of those guys in a lot of these movies.
Apparently, the actor died just the next year, by the way, after this came out. I was just going to say one other thing that sort of stands out about this movie, and I might be in the minority here, but there's a song at the end The Ballad of Harry Warden, and Harry Warden is the killer believed to have escaped from the institution and came back. So it's a song called "The Ballad of Harry Warden," which I think is probably one of the best songs written, for a horror movie. I actually have it on my iTunes. I just think it's extraordinarily catchy. I like the lyrics. I like the music. And I just love the ending. It's an insane laughter, and then this song comes, and I don't know, it's just fantastic. I think many slasher fans, if not horror fans in general, I think this movie is decently well respected. I do know there are some people who like the remake more. And I don't know, I've only seen the remake once, so I can't really talk about it. Off the top of my head, the only thing I like about the remake is that it caused this to be re-released. So, it's a one good thing it did. But I don't know, this movie, to me, it pretty much hits all the right spots. I've seen this like 8, 9, 10 times. It's not my favorite 80s horror movie, but it's like in my top 5. And I love this movie so much. The creepy voice at the end. So, will you be my Bloody Valentine? It just comes out of nowhere and it's creepy as hell. And I don't know, this movie is, for me, it's an easy 10 out of 10. It's fantastic.
I mean, I don't quite enjoy it as much as you do, but yeah, I still think it's a really good slasher movie from the 80s. For me, I mean, the highlight is the uncut version with all the extra violence in it. I give the movie an 8 out of 10. It's a pretty good slasher from the 80s, and I don't think too many people would be disappointed if they're just after a movie that, has some good kills, and, if you're after a slasher movie in general, you can't really go wrong with this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're a slasher fan and you haven't seen this one, and I would definitely recommend trying to get this one, especially, like Chucky said, the uncut version.
Yeah. See, if I had been reviewing the theatrical version, or we can call it the cut version, my rating would go down, probably down to at least a 7. But the Blu-ray that I've got, you've got both options, and I don't think there's any reason to ever watch the cut version, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think I've only seen the theatrical version once. So I bought this. I bought a DVD set. There's April Fool's Day, another classic slasher. So April Fool's Day and My Bloody Valentine on a two set, and that had the theatrical version of the movie. Just a low budget release. And then the very next day, I see the uncut version of My Bloody Valentine, and I buy that. So the first time I watched the theatrical version. Then next day I get to see the uncut version, and I don't think I've ever actually watched the theatrical version again. And like you said, it's not really much reason to. I see that you saw the new Rambo movie, Chucky. What do you think of that?
Well, it's Rambo. I mean, it's just this old dude, killing some motherfuckers.
I've never seen the Rambo movie, but I'm assuming there's more to it than that.
Not really.